Hello everybody, Jade Hamilton here, and happy Reborn Sunshine Yellow Saturday to you. This is a tag run by the lovely Tamara at Once Upon a Nursery. If you haven't already, do give her a follow, because she's a lovely lady. She's full of life. She's just a lovely person, full of passion for scary movies and Steve Irwin and dollies, and she's absolutely lovely person who deserves a lot more subs, so please do go and check her out. I am here with Miss Phoebe Elizabeth again. She's in her little yellow bonnet, and a beautiful sort of lemony yellow ribbed vest from Next. And this was a first size vest, and over the top of that she's got some 0 to 3 month sized floral, the seller referred to them as harem pants, but I don't think they are quite. They're sort of yoga panty things. And they've got, so I don't know if you can see, but they've got really lovely deep red and saffron yellow and cobalt blue flowers all over them. They came in a 2-pack, and Phoebe's sister Joni Marie, who you haven't met yet, has got the other pair. She's got a blue pair. But yeah, Phoebe has asked, because Mummy tried several times last week to upload a story for you, and Phoebe getting a bit antsy because I want my story, Mummy. So yes, we're going to sit and we're going to read her story. This is a little book for, according to the back, it says that they're for 7 to 9-year-olds. And interestingly enough, Freckle Juice was part of this series as well, which is probably why I remember the two being read to us in primary school very, very close together. This is a Heinemann imprint, and it's called Banana Books. I don't know if it's still about, with this beautiful saffron yellow cover. The story I'm going to read to you is by Sheila Lavelle, who anybody like me who's a UK 90s kid will probably remember from the My Best Fiend books, which are wonderful and hilarious, and I will read those should anybody like me to do so. And this one is called The Big Stink. As per all the videos where I read, all copyright goes to Sheila Lavelle and to Heinemann. This is just for entertainment and enjoyment, so please sit back and relax, and we'll begin. Chapter 1. Kelly looked at his painting and groaned. it was the worst picture he'd ever painted, and he knew exactly what Mrs. Platt would think of it. A load of rubbish, she would call it. She said the same thing about all Kelly's work. A bunch of green grapes in a yellow dish, it was meant to be. It looked more like a heap of squash slugs in a bowl of custard. Kelly wasn't much good at art lessons. In fact, he wasn't much good at lessons at all. The only thing Kelly really cared about was getting out onto the sports field on Friday afternoon. Kelly said a bad word under his breath. The one his dad said sometimes when he bashed his thumb with a hammer. He dipped his biggest brush into thick black paint and daubed his painting until it was black all over. The bell rang for dinner time, and Kelly heaved a sigh of relief. "And what is that meant to be, Kelly Adams?" said a grim voice. Kelly found himself gazing into the yellow powdered face of Mrs. Platt. Mrs. Platt was not Kelly's favourite teacher. She had the worst temper in the world, and she wore so much makeup it was like polyfiller filling the cracks. Polyfiller for non-UK folks is gunk that you use to fill up the cracks in plaster work. So you can imagine how thick and greasy this teacher's makeup is. Kelly looked at his black sheet of paper and wanted to giggle. "It's a black cat," he said, "in a cellar with its eyes shut," he added, and he grinned at the rest of the class as they began to snigger. Mrs. Platt tore Kelly's painting from the easel, ripped it into shreds, and dropped it into the waste paper basket. "I don't think it's at all funny," she said coldly, and everybody stopped laughing at once. I think it's high time you stopped messing about and did some work for a change, Kelly Adams. You will go to the headmaster's study straight after lunch. Clear up now, everybody, please." Mr. Pale was a kind headmaster and always treated people fairly, but Kelly still couldn't help his knees wobbling a bit when he knocked at the study door a little while later. "Come in," a voice said at once, and in Kelly went. The headmaster was sat at a big desk in a room crowded with books. There were a few old leather armchairs, a faded, threadbare carpet on the floor, and the walls were lined with framed photographs of past headmasters and football teams. Kelly hardly noticed any of it. His eyes were fixed on the row of cups on the shelf behind the headmaster's head, polished and shining, ready for sports day. In 2 weeks' time, they gleamed like treasure, especially the one in the middle, the biggest one of all, the junior boys 100 metres, the one Kelly had made his mind up to winning for himself this year. "Now, Kelly," Mr. Peel began, "Mrs. Platt tells me you're not working very hard at the moment. Is that true?" Kelly hung his head and poked at a bare patch in the carpet with his toe. "I dunno," he muttered. "I suppose so. I'm afraid all your teachers have complained about the same thing." The headmaster went on. "I know sport means more than anything to you, and we all know how gifted you are, but you mustn't let it become more important than the rest of your lessons, must you?" "No, Mr. Peel," said Kelly, feeling his face go red. His school dinner of mince and cabbage made a small gurgling noise in his stomach. "So you'll try a bit harder at your work, eh?" said Mr. Peel kindly. "Your art lessons as well?" "Yes, Mr. Peel," promised Kelly, as if he really meant it. Mr. Peel smiled. "Good," he said. "You can start this afternoon. Mrs. Platt wants you in the art room at 2 o'clock." Kelly's mouth fell open. "Oh, sir, Mr. Peel," he gasped in dismay. "It's Friday. It's games on Fridays. I'll miss me training for the 100 metres. "That'll be all, Kelly," said the headmaster quietly, and Kelly's heart sank into his plimsolls. A bit more vocabulary for you. Games is what a lot of English primary school kids call PE. So Kelly, bless him, I think he seems to struggle a little bit academically, so he really looks forward to his PE. And Mr. Peel just told him that as a punishment, he will have another art lesson instead of PE. And plimsolls are gym shoes. They're shoes with rubber soles that you wear for PE and sport usually. They're sort of bit like sort of Conversey type things, but they're much cheaper and quite often don't have laces. uh, That'll be all, Kelly, said the headmaster quietly, and Kelly's heart sank into his plimsolls. "That Mrs. Platt is a horrible old witch," he said to himself bitterly as he stumped up and down the hall to the playground. "I'll get even with her one of these days, see if I don't." And Kelly kicked hard at the wooden fence near the school gate for 5 whole minutes, which didn't make him feel any better at all. Chapter 2. Kelly let himself in the kitchen door and flung his satchel on the floor in the corner. "What's for tea, ma'am?" he said, peering into the saucepan his mother was stirring on the stove. His mother tasted the contents and added more pepper. "It's bean casserole," she said. Kelly made a face. "I don't want to know what it's been," he said. "I want to know what it is now." He ducked as his mother aimed a jab at him with the wooden spoon. "Why do we always have to have health food?" he complained. "The other kids get fish and chips and bacon and eggs and ice cream." "The other kids are not going to be Olympic gold medalists," said Kelly's mother, ruffling his hair fondly. "Anyway, it's not ready yet. I want you to run down to the fish shop for a couple of kippers for your dad's supper." and pick that satchel up before you go. Kelly slouched off down the road, moodily chewing the crust of bread he grabbed on the way out. This wasn't turning out to be his day. Not just one lousy painting lesson, but two. Nothing but yucky old bean stew for tea. And worst of all, he'd missed his sports practice. All because of that mean old bat, Mrs. Platt. Mean old bat, Mrs. Platt, chanted Kelly, liking the sound of it. Rotten cat, Mrs. Platt, old and fat, Mrs. Platt. Kelly's walk became jaunty. He was beginning to enjoy this little game. If only he could think of a way to get his own back, he thought, racking his brains for an idea. Just as Kelly was coming out of the fish shop with a parcel of kippers in his hand, it happened. Something about the strong, fishy smell of the kippers made him stop suddenly on the pavement as the most amazing, marvellous idea popped out of the blue into his head. Kelly laughed out loud and turned back into the shop. "Another kipper, please, Mr. Wilkes," he said, "and let's have a big one, the biggest you've got." Again, for those of you who aren't familiar, a kipper is a smoked herring. They are they're quite an old-fashioned thing. My dad and my granddad used to have them quite a lot. I love them, but they are very much an acquired taste because they are very, very strong smelling and tasting. I remember when because I used to buy, like Kelly in this story, I used to go to my local supermarket and I used to buy whole kippers, and I used to bake them in the oven with butter, and they used to smell absolutely delicious. But people used to complain because they said the smell would just permeate the whole building, which I did feel quite bad about. But unfortunately, kippers are kippers, and that's what they do. The smell tends to kind of get everywhere. The fishmonger weighed an enormous kipper and wrapped it in brown paper. 65 pence, he said, slapping it on the counter. Weighs over £1/2. That'll be a tasty treat for a big boy like you. It's not for me, said Kelly with a grin. It's for my teacher. Mr. Wilkes raised his eyebrows. Used to be apples in my day, he said, shaking his head in wonder. Kelly didn't hear him. He ran out of the shop, little snorts of laughter escaping from him like puffs of steam from a traction engine. That kipper had cost Kelly more than a whole week's pocket money, but it was worth it. He almost flew up the high street towards home, and turning the corner, he ran straight into his friend Tim Connors. Tim was small and red-haired and freckled, and the best football player in the school. "What's up, Kelly?" said Tim. "Won the pools or something, have you?" Sorry, I keep stopping for vocabulary. The pools in this case means the football pools. Now, the football pools were a thing, and I think they still are, actually. You could get a special coupon that you had to fill out on a Saturday when all the football matches were on. and you had to guess the results of the matches and who would win and who would lose and who would draw. And if you got a certain number right, you could send them in to, I think it was Littlewood's catalogue fame, and they would give you a certain amount of money, quite a substantial amount of money actually. And for, and obviously if you win a big amount of money like that, it's quite exciting. So let's. What's up, Kelly? Said Tim. Won the pools or something, have you? Tim, said Kelly solemnly, swear you won't tell us all. Cross your heart and hope to die. Tim crossed his heart and hoped to die, and then his eyes grew rounder and rounder as Kelly told him his plan. Chapter 3. At 8 o'clock on Monday morning, Kelly was ready for school. He shovelled down his bowl of muesli, munched his way through 4 slices of wholemeal toast and honey, and swallowed his vitamin pill with a large glass of orange juice. Yum! That sounds like a really nice breakfast, actually. He collected the brown paper parcel with the kipper in it from the back of the airing cupboard where it had been hidden all week. Lovely, he sighed, putting his nose to the paper. Nice and warm and getting a bit high already. Well, high in this case means a bit stinky, smelly. Kelly stowed the kipper away in his satchel and went into his mother's bedroom, where he found her trying to squeeze into last year's black skirt and making faces at herself in the mirror. Bye, Mum, he said, kissing her cheek. See you later. Cheerio, Dad, he added as his father came out of the bathroom with a bit of pink toilet paper stuck to his chin where he cut himself shaving. Off to school already? Off to school already? Frowned Kelly's father. Bit early, ain't it? Kelly mumbled something about having things to do and scuttled off down the stairs. He thanked his lucky stars that they were both too busy getting ready for work to take much notice of him. When Kelly arrived at school, there was nobody about except Mr. James, the deaf old caretaker. He was wheezing his way around the main hall, opening classroom doors with his big master key that fitted all the locks in the school. He cackled with laughter when he saw Kelly. Bet you forgot your homework, he chuckled. Sneaking in to do it before the teacher gets here, eh? He cackled even more as Kelly's face turned red, and then he shuffled away, muttering and wheezing to himself. Kelly slipped into the classroom and went to Mrs. Platt's desk at the front of the room. He unwrapped the big smelly kipper and pulled out a box of large-sized drawing pens from his pocket. Then, crawling into the dark recess under the desk, Kelly firmly pinned the kipper to the wood on the underside. Kelly stood up and looked at the desk. The kipper was completely hidden by the carved oak panels all the way round. Even if you put your head in the knee-hole and looked underneath, it was too dark to see anything. The kipper might stay there for weeks, months even, before anybody found it. And what a stink it would be making by then. Sorry, guys. Excuse me while I... Kelly did a brief war dance round the classroom. Then he hurried outside, stuffed the kipper paper in the dustbin, and went to wash his hands. He found Tim Connors in the boys' cloakroom. "I've done it, Tim," he whispered gleefully, and his friend's green eyes sparkled in delight. That day was one of the best days in Kelly's life. He did no work at all, for all his attention was fixed on Mrs. Platt. She kept pausing in the middle of a sentence and sniffing the air in a puzzled sort of way, and Kelly could hardly stop himself from laughing out loud. When Kelly and Tim left for home at the end of the day, Mrs. Platt was emptying every drawer in her desk and sniffing suspiciously at everything she took out. The two boys raced each other home, whooping for joy and throwing their satchels in the air. "It'll be even better tomorrow," grinned Kelly. "Just you wait and see." Chapter 4. When Kelly woke up on Tuesday morning, his head ached, his face burned, he shivered and sweated by turns, and his throat felt like sandpaper. "Looks like flu," tutted Kelly's mother, tucking the quilt firmly round Kelly's shoulders. "No school for you today, my lad. I'll go and phone Dr. Bennett." But Kelly was already struggling out of bed. "Oh, Ma'am, I'm all right, honest," he croaked, wincing with pain as he tried to swallow. I can't stay off school. I don't want to get behind with my work." His mother stared at him, astonished. "Why is work so important to you all of a sudden?" she said. "Getting fit in time for sports day is what matters at the moment. Do you want to miss your chance of winning that cup?" "No, ma'am," groaned Kelly, feeling weak at the thought. "So get back into bed this minute," said his mother firmly. "I'll make you a nice hot lemon drink." Kelly lay back against the pillows and closed his eyes. What a thing to happen! After all his planning, he was going to be stuck here, missing all the fun. But his mother was right. The important thing was to get better quickly in time for sports day. When the doctor came a little while later, he confirmed that Kelly had flu. Lot of it about," he said briskly, blinking down at Kelly through thick glasses. "Bed for the rest of the week, plenty of fluids, aspirin for the fever." And he bustled out. That week seemed to go on forever. Kelly had books and comics in plenty, and his dad even carried the telly upstairs so he could watch Banana Man. But nothing seemed to interest him for long. Now, for those of you who have got access to BritBox, which is the BBC and ITV's streaming service. Banana Man is a cartoon that's on there. It was a kids' cartoon that was made by and shown on children's BBC. It was about a little boy called Eric who turned into a superhero called Banana Man every time he ate a banana. And the joke was that Banana Man, although he was incredibly well-meaning, was also utterly incompetent. So a lot of his saving the day was actually done more by luck than judgment. But yeah, Kelly, is obviously feeling a bit worse for wear if even Banana Man can't cheer him up. Day after day, he lay there, bored and fed up, and frantic to know what was happening at school. Kelly found out on Friday. At about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, he was feeling a lot better sitting at his bedroom table in his dressing gown and slippers, doing a jigsaw puzzle. Suddenly, his bedroom door opened, and Kelly gave a cry of delight, as the freckled face of Tim Connors appeared. Tim, he beamed, why aren't you at school? We've all been sent home. Tim burst out and began to bounce gleefully about on Kelly's bed. Because of the awful stink! What a shame you missed it all. And Kelly's eyes widened as Tim told his story. You could smell it all over the school by Wednesday, he said. We got moved to another classroom so they could make some tests. First they thought it was a gas leak or something. And I didn't half laugh when they got all the floorboards up looking for dead rats. Now they're talking about a dead body or something in the drains. Tim rolled about on the bed. They've closed the school, said Kelly anxiously. How long for? What about sports day? Oh, they'll probably cancel that, chortled Tim. The whole place is full of health inspectors and things, opening up the drains. What's the smell like now? Said Kelly in a small voice. Putrid, crowed Tim happily. It hits you as soon as you walk in the main door. He gazed at Kelly admiringly. You're a genius, Kelly Adams. You really are. Kelly sat by the window for a long time after his friend had gone. He felt a bit scared at the way his joke had turned out. It had all got a bit too far. He'd never meant the whole school to close down. And what if they had to cancel sports day? Kelly would miss his chance of winning that cup. After all his weeks and weeks of training, he couldn't let that happen. Kelly began to pace up and down his room, thinking hard. Something had to be done. And soon. Chapter 5. A few minutes after midnight that night, when his parents were fast asleep, Kelly got out of bed and dressed in his warmest clothes. wearing plimsolls so he wouldn't make any noise, and with a black woolly hat pulled down over his ears rather, tiptoed silently down the stairs and out of the house into the street. The night was pitch black, with no moon or stars to light his way, and Kelly's heart thumped hard in his chest. It was very scary out here all alone in the dark, but he made up his mind to break into the school and get rid of the kipper. It was the only thing to do. Kelly ran all the way, glad to find nobody about at this late hour, and when he reached the school, all was quiet and still. He crept past the dark and silent caretaker's cottage and began to make his round the back of the school building, hoping to find a window open somewhere. As he was passing the main door, Kelly stopped and stared in surprise. The big door was slightly open, and a faint light gleamed along the tiled floor of the hall. Kelly's mouth went dry. Somebody was inside the school. There were no signs that the lock had been forced. Could it be the workmen doing something to the drains at this time of night? It must be, decided Kelly, and slid quickly around the door to the hall. At least it solved the problem of how to get in. As soon as he was inside, Kelly put his hand over his mouth and almost choked. The smell was everywhere, hanging in the air like smoke. It was the most disgusting stink he'd ever come across in his whole life. Worse than that dead rat crawling with maggots that he and Tim Connors had once found in the rubbish tip. But all thoughts of the smell went clean out of Kelly's head when he saw that the light was coming from a half-open door at the end of the hall. Somebody was in the headmaster's study. Kelly's legs turned to jelly, and he longed to creep away back to his safe, warm bed. But that wouldn't tell anything. He forced himself along the hall towards the door. Holding his breath, he peeped in. A tall, skinny boy of about 15 in a Spider-Man t-shirt and dirty jeans was standing in front of the fireplace holding an open sack. A short, fat youth with a shaved head and one gold earring was lifting the sports cups one by one from the shelf and putting them carefully into the sack. "Get a move on, Grubsy," hissed the tall one, looking uneasy. "The old codger might wake up and notice his master key's gone." He coughed and "I can't stand this pong much longer, neither." Kelly stepped silently back into the shadows, clenching his fists. They were stealing the sports cups, all of them. Even his cup, the junior boys' 100 meters. He couldn't let them get away with it. And then Kelly noticed something that made him stare even harder, his eyes fixed on the door. The caretaker's master key, the one these thieves had used to get in. It was still in the lock. The two youths were now starting towards the door with their bulging sack, and Kelly knew he didn't have a second to spare. Darting forward, he grabbed the handle and slammed the door shut. Then, with trembling fingers, he turned the key in the lock. He was only just in time, and the lock clicked, and Kelly's hair almost stood on end as the thieves hurled themselves against the door, yelling and kicking and pounding with their fists. "Now to call the cops," said Kelly gleefully, rushing across the hall to the telephone and feeling like Superman. Chapter 6. Kelly stood in the school hall a little while later, watching the scowling thieves as they were led away by two plain-clothes detectives. A tall police sergeant with a bushy black moustache stood over him, making notes in a book. All the policemen had hankies over their noses because of the smell. I'll take care of this one," said the sergeant, and Kelly's knees shook. The police had arrived in no time at all after Kelly's 999 call. They had been astonished to find that a 9-year-old boy had captured a pair of thieves single-handed. "They're local kids, of course," Kelly's policeman told him, "from the senior school. Knew where the cups were kept." "Yes," said Kelly, "and they knew the caretaker had a special master key that fitted all the doors. That's how they got in." "Right, right," said the sergeant admiringly, "and that's how you caught them. Bright little beggar, aren't you? Ever thought of joining the police force?" "I'm going to be an Olympic gold medalist," said Kelly, and the sergeant grinned. "Good for you," he said. "Now then, there are a few questions I want to ask before I take you home. What was a little lad like you doing here all on your own at this time of night, for one thing? And what is that horrible smell, for another?" In the excitement, Kelly had forgotten all about the kipper. He stared up at the policeman, trying to think of something to say. There was a long silence. "It might be best to tell the truth, you know," said the policeman gently, and Kelly found himself pouring out the whole story. It took quite a long time, but the sergeant listened patiently until Kelly finished. Once or twice he made a funny noise in his hanky that might have been a laugh or a sneeze. Finally, he shut his notebook and smiled. "Sounds like the truth to me," he said. "Nobody would be daft enough to make up a tale like that. I think we'll just forget about the whole thing, shall we? I'll take you home before your mum and dad wake up and think you've been kidnapped." "Wow, thanks," said Kelly, his eyes shining. "But I'd better do something about that kipper before we go." "I'll give you a hand," said the policeman, and together they followed the smell of their noses to Kelly's classroom door. The door had been propped open to let out the smell, and the desks had all been stacked in one corner. If the smell in the hall was bad, inside the classroom itself it was unbelievable. It was as if all the rotten, stinking fish in the world had been piled up in one room and sprinkled with pig manure. Kelly and the policeman dragged apart the heap of desks until they had unearthed Mrs. Platt's desk at the bottom. Kelly's eyes streamed, and he was very nearly sick on the floor as he crawled into the space under the desk and unpinned the slimy, rotting mess that had once been a kipper. "Phew!" gasped the policeman, holding his nose and handing Kelly a plastic bag from his pocket. "If that thing was any higher, it would need a pilot's license." Kelly sealed the plastic bag, and the policeman opened some of the windows. The smell was already becoming less strong, and by Monday it would have all floated away. The school would open again, and the sports would take place as planned. Kelly breathed a huge sigh of relief, which somehow turned into a yawn. "That'll teach you to roam the streets when you should be in bed, young man," said the policeman. "Make sure you never do it again." And he drove Kelly home, none the worse for his adventure. They only stopped once all the way, and that was to throw the stinking kipper over the bridge and into the river. Kelly had never been so glad to see the last of anything in his whole life. Well, Kelly was a little bit naughty, wasn't he, Phoebes? It's not nice to put a smelly fish under your teacher's desk, is it? No, that was quite a naughty thing to do. But he turned out all right in the end, didn't he? He saved all the sports cups and he got rid of the kipper. So he's a good lad, really. I just don't think he thought it through when he thought up his idea, did he? Well, I hope you enjoy that. Well, you enjoyed that. Thank you so much for watching, subscribing, commenting. Have a lovely rest of your day, and Phoebe and I will see you soon. Can you say bye-bye, Phoebes? Good girl. Thanks, everybody. Cheerio.